They never counted the cost of their cruelty, but I did, keeping a silent ledger in the back of my mind for years. They never realized I was the one keeping score, and their account was about to be called due in the most public way imaginable. Before we dive into the secret I've carried for all these years, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and drop a comment below guessing what the final twist will be. Now, where were we? For my entire life, I was less a person and more a cautionary tale. I wasn't Amelia, the daughter or the sister. I was Amelia, the artistic failure, a walking, breathing exhibit of poor life choices, conveniently available for display at every family gathering. These events were my personal crucifixions, and they never ran out of nails. My older sister, Jessica, was their masterpiece, the golden child. A high-flying corporate lawyer with a corner office that overlooked the city, she wore her success like a second skin, a smug superiority radiating from her in shimmering waves. I, on the other hand, was a painter. My world wasn't one of glass and steel, but of canvas and turpentine. I didn't have a corporate ladder. I had a tiny, paint-splattered studio apartment that was a perpetual olfactory cocktail of linseed oil and deferred dreams. My transportation wasn't a gleaming luxury sedan leased by a firm. It was a 10-year-old hatchback I'd affectionately named the Rattler, which sounded like a tin of loose bolts in a tumble dryer any time it dared to exceed 50 miles per hour. My family, with the surgical precision of trained emotional assassins, never, ever let me forget the chasm between our lives. Their favorite pastime wasn't golf or sailing. It was the casual, systematic dismantling of my self-worth. Thanksgiving was the annual stage for my father's grand performance. He would clear his throat, a theatrical sound that commanded the attention of the entire table, and then pivot his gaze to me. "Amelia! Honey!" he'd begin, his voice a thick, syrupy performance of paternal concern. "Are you managing okay? Let me know if you need a small loan to get you through the winter." The pity in his voice was a performance for the audience of aunts and uncles, but his eyes, when they met mine, held a glint of cold, cruel satisfaction. Christmas was my mother's domain. Her tradition was to gift me painfully practical, almost insulting items. One year it was a bulk package of ramen noodles, the next a grocery store gift card with a sum so modest it was clearly a statement. The year I turned 26, she gave me a new set of tires for the Rattler. Meanwhile, Jessica would be unwrapping designer handbags, keys to a new convertible, and all expenses paid weekend trips to Aspen. Each gift to me was a public service announcement, a neon sign broadcasting my perceived poverty and their magnanimous tolerance of it. But Jessica, she was the true artist of the family, a virtuoso of the subtle, soul-crushing jab. She had a habit of drifting into my small studio, her expensive heels clicking on the stained floorboards. She'd glance at a canvas, a piece I had poured weeks of my life and the entirety of my heart into, and tilt her head with feigned interest. "Oh, that's a cute little hobby," she'd say, the words dripping with a condescension, so thick I could feel it coat the room. "But really, Ames, have you thought about getting a real job? For your own good. I just worry about you." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart, meticulously crafted to reinforce my designated place at the very bottom of their social and financial food chain. This wasn't teasing, it was psychological warfare. It was a constant, low-humming reminder that in their world, your value was written on your bank statement, and my story was a tragedy they loved to read aloud. I tried, in the beginning, to make them understand. I talk about the sense of purpose my art gave me, a feeling no paycheck could ever replicate. I try to describe the intoxicating freedom of my days, the unparalleled joy of creating something from a blank void. It was like trying to describe a sunset to someone who could only see in shades of gray. They just exchanged those looks, the ones that screamed, "Bless her poor, naive heart, she doesn't know any better." So eventually I stopped. I learned to build a fortress around myself, to sit through their excruciating dinners with a weak, polite smile plastered on my face, internally counting the seconds until I could escape back to my world, a world where I wasn't a walking, breathing disappointment. Then, about 6 months ago, after a particularly brutal Easter lunch, where my contribution of a homemade dessert was openly laughed at, the universe finally threw me a lifeline. His name was Damien. I was in the city park, my sanctuary, sketching the gnarled, crooked branches of a century-old oak tree when he sat on the other end of my bench. He wasn't flashy or loud. He was the antithesis of the men my sister dated. He wore a simple, well-worn gray t-shirt and jeans, but he carried himself with a quiet, solid stillness that was magnetic. He didn't interrupt me for a long time, just sat there, enjoying the silence. Then, in a low, gentle voice that seemed to vibrate with warmth, he simply asked, "What do you see when you look at that tree?" No one had ever asked me that before. They asked me what my art sold for, not what it meant. I hesitantly showed him my sketchbook, and his eyes, these incredibly intense, intelligent eyes, didn't just glance at the page. He didn't see a hobby. He saw the lines, the shading, the perspective. He saw the way I tried to capture not just the look of the tree, but the feel of it. He saw me. We talked for hours, until the sun began to set and the park lights flickered on. He told me he was in investments, a term so vague it was almost meaningless, but I didn't care what he did. For the first time in my life, I was with someone who listened to my dreams without a hint of judgment, who saw my passion not as a liability, but as my greatest strength. He loved the part of me my family had tried so hard to extinguish. We fell in love, fast and hard, a whirlwind of quiet understanding and profound connection. With him, I wasn't a failure, I was a creator. 2 months ago, after he had spent an evening holding me while I cried, recounting the latest condescending phone call from my mother, he looked at me and said, "Marry me. Let's build our own world, one where you are celebrated, not tolerated." We went to City Hall the next week with just 2 friends as witnesses, standing there in a simple white dress I'd bought from a secondhand store, placing a simple silver band on my finger. I had never felt richer. I finally felt seen, truly and completely. I made him promise we'd keep it our secret for a little while, and more importantly, that we'd keep him a secret. He was my peace, and I wasn't ready to share him with my family's war. The invitation arrived like a formal declaration of war, landing in my mailbox with an audible thud. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind with beveled edges, embossed with gold lettering that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Jessica was getting married, an event destined to be the social Chernobyl of the decade for my family. The family group chat, my own personal digital torture chamber, immediately exploded. My phone buzzed incessantly. First came the photos of the venue, a sprawling, historic countryside mansion with manicured gardens and its own goddamn lake. This was followed by an endless, nauseating debate about the $1,000 a plate menu, with my mother agonizing over whether the Chardonnay was prestigious enough. Then, the private messages began their tactical assault. A text from my mother. "Amelia, please try to find something appropriate to wear. First impressions matter, and this will be a very influential crowd. Maybe that nice black dress you wore to Grandpa's funeral." A message from Jessica, cloaked in the guise of sisterly concern. "Hey, Ames. About the gift registry, the items are a bit pricey, so don't feel bad. Maybe just go in with someone on a smaller gift. I know things are tight, and I don't want you to feel awkward." And the final blow, a voicemail from my father, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hope you're not planning on bringing some starving artist type as your plus one. This is a classy event, Amelia. We have a reputation to uphold. Don't embarrass us." Each message was a fresh paper cut on a wound that never fully healed. My first instinct was to burn the invitation, to shred it into 1,000 pieces and pretend it never came. I could already picture it. Me, exiled to a table in the back with the distant cousins, deflecting a barrage of passive-aggressive jabs about my job, my dress, my car, my entire existence. The thought filled me with a familiar, suffocating dread that felt like a physical weight on my chest. That night, I told Damien I wasn't going. I couldn't. My voice cracked as I whispered, "I just can't do it again." He listened, his gaze never leaving my face as I unraveled, the words tumbling out in a torrent of long-suppressed pain and humiliation. When I was done, my voice trembling and my cheeks wet with tears, he didn't offer empty platitudes or easy solutions. He simply took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles in that steady, grounding way of his. "We're going," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of fact, imbued with that quiet steel I'd come to rely on. "You are not the person they think you are. You are the most brilliant, talented, and resilient woman I've ever met. You are not going to hide from them anymore. You are not their cautionary tale. You are the story. You're going to walk into that room with your head held high, and I will be right there with you." His confidence was a shield, and for the first time, I felt the flickering embers of my own resolve catch fire. I picked up my phone, my hand steady now, and texted my mother a simple, declarative sentence. "I will be attending with my +1, my husband, Damien." Her reply was almost instantaneous, a single, skeptical message that dripped with disbelief. "Husband? Oh, that's nice, dear." The morning of the wedding, my stomach felt like a nest of writhing snakes. Damien had insisted on buying me a dress, a deep, sapphire blue gown of liquid silk that fit as if it were made for me. It cost more than 3 months of my rent, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a stranger. Not the family reject, but a woman who looked formidable. Damien stood behind me, a vision in a perfectly tailored dark suit that made him look like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. He radiated a quiet authority that was almost intimidating. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice soft. "Ready to go to war?" He meant it as a joke, but my answering nod was deadly serious. I took a deep, shaky breath. Ready. The mansion was even more absurdly opulent in person. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped from the ceilings, and the air buzzed with the chatter of people whose shoes cost more than the Rattler. I kept my hand on Damien's arm like a lifeline, my knuckles white, as we navigated the treacherous social waters. For a while, we managed to blend in, observing the grotesque spectacle from the periphery. But the cocktail hour was a minefield I couldn't avoid forever. My Aunt Carol, a woman with a face permanently pinched in disapproval, slithered up to us, her eyes scanning my dress with undisguised suspicion. "Is that a rental, dear? A little fancy for you, isn't it?" Before I could respond, my uncle, a man whose personality was as loud and garish as his ties, clapped me on the back hard enough to make me stumble. "Good to see you, Amelia. Don't fill up on these little snacks. The main course is filet mignon. Probably the best meal you'll have all year." "Ah," he boomed, oblivious to the heat rising in my cheeks as he winked at Damien. But the true turning point, the moment the ground shifted beneath my feet and the last vestige of family affection in my heart turned to ice, happened near the manicured gardens. I had slipped away for a moment of quiet, desperate for a breath of air that wasn't thick with perfume and hypocrisy. I overheard 2 voices from behind a large, ornate hedge, Jessica and my father. "I still don't know why you had to invite her," Jessica hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "She's going to bring the whole tone of the event down. God knows who this husband of hers is." My father's voice was low and conspiratorial. "It's fine. It makes us look gracious. Besides, it's a good thing we stepped in and made that call to the gallery last year. Can you imagine if she'd actually gotten that grant? She'd still be thinking this little art project of hers is a viable career. We saved her from herself, really. It was an act of mercy." My blood ran cold. The gallery. The grant. A year ago, I had been a finalist for a prestigious emerging artist grant. It was a life-changing amount of money, enough to fund my work for 3 full years. It would have meant a larger studio, better supplies, and a solo exhibition. It would have changed everything. Days before the final decision, my application was inexplicably pulled for unforeseen administrative reasons. I was devastated. I had believed it was just cosmically bad luck, another failure to add to my collection. But it wasn't. It was them. They hadn't just mocked me. They had actively, secretly, and maliciously sabotaged the single biggest opportunity of my life. In that moment, the years of accumulated hurt curdled into something colder, harder, and sharper. This was no longer about survival. It was about retribution. I walked back into the reception hall, my expression a mask of perfect calm, and found Damien. I squeezed his hand, and he looked at me, a question in his eyes. I just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The plan was in motion. The speeches came after the main course, a parade of performative sentimentality. Jessica stood at the microphone, glowing in her ridiculously expensive dress, a vision of manufactured perfection. She gushed about her perfect husband, her perfect job, her perfect, Instagrammable life. Then, her eyes found mine in the crowd, a sugary sweet smile playing on her lips. I am just so blessed, she said, her voice dripping with false humility as she looked directly at me. And I truly pray that everyone, even those who are still finding their path, gets to feel this kind of success one day. It was a direct hit, a public broadcasting of my failure to the entire room. I could feel 100 pairs of pitying eyes boring into me. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. But then I felt Damien's hand on the small of my back, a firm, grounding touch. He leaned in and whispered in my ear the 2 words I was waiting for. Just wait. The moment of truth arrived after the plates were cleared, as my father, a man who lives to schmooze, made his rounds like a minor king surveying his court. He finally landed at our table, his eyes gliding right past me to fix on my husband, sizing him up with the dismissive air of a man evaluating a piece of furniture. So, my father began, his voice a masterclass in condescension. Amelia didn't tell us much about you. What is it you do? He was already looking past Damien, scanning the room for his next, more important target. Before I could utter a word, Damien stood up. He was a full head taller than my father, and his sheer presence seemed to suck the air out of the immediate area. He extended a hand, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Damien Blackwood, he said. His voice was a low, calm rumble, yet it cut through the din of the reception like a razor. My father froze, his hand halfway to Damien's. The name hung in the air, electric and heavy. I watched, with a kind of detached fascination, as the color literally drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask. My Uncle Robert, a finance broker who happened to be standing nearby, actually choked on his champagne, sputtering into a napkin as he stared in disbelief. Damien Blackwood wasn't just a name. It was a legend in their world, a ruthless, almost mythical titan of industry. The shark they all idolized in their business magazines and spoke of in hushed, worshipful tones. The man whose company had acquired and dismantled 2 of his biggest competitors in the last year. He was the man they all dreamed of being but were utterly terrified of. Whispers erupted and spread through the room like a contagion. Did he say Blackwood? Is that the Damien Blackwood? What is he doing here with her? My sister Jessica, who had been holding court and laughing with her bridesmaids, turned to see what the commotion was about. Her jaw didn't just drop, it unhinged. Her perfectly made-up face went completely slack with disbelief, her smile frozen in a rictus of shock. My mother, who had been making her way over, stopped dead in her tracks, one hand clutching the pearls at her throat as if to keep her composure from shattering. The transformation was instantaneous, and it was sickening to behold. Suddenly, I was the most fascinating person in the room. My mother rushed over, her voice a high-pitched, wobbly mess. Amelia, darling, your dress is just stunning. You look absolutely radiant, she gushed, grabbing my arm as if we were the dearest of friends. My father, having rebooted his brain, began to stammer, his face a grotesque mask of fawning sycophancy. Mr. Blackwood, sir, it is an absolute honor. I follow your work religiously. A genius, an absolute genius. Amelia, my girl, why didn't you tell us? He called me his girl. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Jessica shoved her way through the forming crowd, her eyes wide with a frantic, desperate calculation. Oh my God, Amelia! You married Damien Blackwood? Why didn't you say anything? We have to get lunch. We have so much to catch up on. She actually tried to hug me, her arms reaching for me with a hunger that had nothing to do with sisterly affection and everything to do with social climbing. That was it. That was the moment the trap sprung. I gently pushed her arms away and stood up, my own sense of calm a startling contrast to their frantic energy. The area fell silent. No, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden stillness. No, we have nothing to catch up on. I looked from my sister to my mother, to my father, letting my gaze linger on each of their stunned, greedy faces. For my entire life, you have measured my worth in dollar signs. You laughed at my art, you mocked my life, and you sabotaged my future because I didn't fit into your tiny, narrow box of what success looks like. I took Damien's hand, my voice gaining strength with every word. This man, I said, loved me when he thought I had nothing. He saw a person that all of you were too busy judging to ever actually see. And yes, his name is Damien Blackwood. But that isn't the whole story. A new wave of confused silence fell over them. I smiled, a real smile this time, but it didn't reach my eyes. You see, you were right about one thing. My art is a hobby now. A very, very profitable one. For the last 5 years, while you were pitying me, I was selling my work under a pseudonym, A. Finch, to a select group of international collectors. While you were gifting me ramen and grocery cards, I was quietly investing every single dollar with the guidance of the best financial mind in the country. Our meeting wasn't an accident. Damien was my biggest collector. He sought me out, the artist, long before he met me, the person. I gestured with my head towards Damien. My husband didn't rescue me from poverty. He simply helped me manage the wealth I had already built, all on my own. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Jessica looked as if she'd been physically struck. That grant you saved me from a year ago? I continued, my voice now as cold as ice. It was pocket change. But your call to the gallery, Dad, it told me everything I needed to know. It proved you would never change. So we made a new plan. I looked directly at my father, whose face had gone from white to a blotchy, terrified red. I believe your company has been struggling lately. Looking for a private investor to bail you out? A silent partner. I watched the dawning, sickening horror in his eyes as he connected the dots. That silent partner is a holding company. My holding company. As of 9 a.m. yesterday morning, I own a controlling interest in everything you've ever built. Your legacy is now mine. I then turned my gaze to Jessica, who was staring at me, speechless. And Jessica, that prestigious law firm you're a junior partner at? The one your future is riding on. As of last week, it's a new subsidiary of Blackwood Capital, which means, ultimately, you now work for my husband. And by extension for me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told them the truth, laying their hypocrisy bare for all their influential friends to see. My father looked like he was going to be sick. My mother looked like she'd seen a ghost. And Jessica, she just stared at me, completely broken, the empire she had built her identity on crumbling at her feet. We didn't stay for the cake. Damien and I turned and, with our heads held high, walked straight out of that mansion, leaving my family standing in the wreckage of their own making. As we stepped into the cool night air, I felt a lifetime of weight lift from my shoulders. The best revenge wasn't the money or the power. It was the freedom of knowing they could never hurt me again. I no longer needed their approval. I had finally approved of myself. If this story left you speechless, smash that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, was justice served, or did I go too far? And don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss next week's chilling confession.